Greetings, everyone. Some old man back in front of the computer again. Today, I'd like to talk about getting ready for the coming shortage that we may be facing. Don't believe me? I invite you to type the words food shortage in your favorite internet search engine. Go ahead, I'll wait. I did it just now, and there's any number of articles on the subject. Some will shout to the world that the world is about to end, while others observe there's no food shortage, just a temporary supply shortage caused by panic buying and the fact that deliveries aren't getting made. Well, sure, it's the same thing. We all remember what happened with toilet paper last year, don't we? Same thing's about to happen with a lot of other things now. Delays and shortages caused by interruptions in shipping are causing shelves to be emptied of everyday things, from food to electronics to furniture. For the most part, the biggest impact that people have seen so far is an increase in the price of consumer goods. But if supply chains get just a little bit more messed up, is it hard to imagine that we could see real shortages? Not just imports from other countries, but domestically produced foods. What do you do when the trucks can't deliver things to your city for a week? Remember, local stores and distribution centers don't have more than a few days of supplies. Given that temporary shortage is inevitable for whatever reason, you should be ready for it. Most people have at least a few days of food in the refrigerator and cupboards. Let's say that your typical family of 4 shops once a week and purchases just enough for that week. The probability is that there is some interruption in deliveries, then the family would have at least half of their supply remaining. Sometimes more, sometimes less, but on average half. What happens if the problem lasts longer than a few days? If it was something like a hurricane or a winter snowstorm, one would think that our family would have stocked up prior to the storm. But what if it was something like an earthquake? It has no warning. You got what you got. Certainly, every time a little bit of unusual weather around here happens, it's not uncommon to see bread, milk, and eggs cleaned out. This doesn't make a lot of sense to me since milk and eggs require refrigeration. And a lot of these events knock out the electricity. But about bread? Bread doesn't keep that long even if you had a refrigeration. What's the point? What were these people thinking buying milk, bread, and eggs? Are you going to survive on French toast? Ideally, if we want to be ready though, if there's a shortage at the store, we should have at least a little bit extra stocked up at home. This is what's called a deep pantry. How deep does your pantry need to be? How long do we need to get by if things are unavailable? A week? 2 weeks? A month? 6 months? Trust me, you can't store milk, bread, and eggs for that long, aside from things like power outages. Instead, we must consider what we can store for extended periods. A lot of YouTube channels that I follow display advertisements for freeze-dried foods. Some people think that freeze-dried is the way to go, and it does have certain advantages. It lasts for a long time. My biggest objection to freeze-dried is that it's the most expensive food out there. Me, I'm cheap. Well, maybe not cheap, frugal. And I've got better things to spend my money on when I'm not cheap. You can buy into freeze-dried if you want, but it shouldn't be your first and only line of prepared foods. Instead, many everyday foods have decent shelf lives. Typical canned goods are okay for at least a couple of years. even after several years, 5, 6, or more, they'd certainly be safe to eat if of decreasing nutritional value. Just watch out for damaged cans that might suggest there's possibility of botulism. Just about anything can be found in the can, from vegetables to soups to canned meats. Accumulating an extra month or two of food in the form of canned goods is simple. Use a method called copy canning. When you need a can of something, say chili, buy 2 cans instead of 1. Or if you like chili and you always buy 6 cans, go ahead and buy 8 and put those extras on the shelf. Keep doing that so that you collect as much as you think you need to last for your survival interval. Sure, it may take you 6 months or a year to reach your entire stock of everything you want to have as backup. But you know what? That's how you get it done, is a little bit at a time. Okay, there's more detail to it than that, but if you want to read details on how to do copy canning, there's a lot of good sources out there on the internet. Use Google or your favorite search engine. Another thing you can stock up on is rice. Rice lasts forever. It's relatively cheap. It stores well. It's not hard to prepare once you figure out how to do it. And in fact, dried beans are almost as cheap as rice. Beans and rice make a nutritionally complete diet all by themselves. Just boring. But boring is better than going hungry. Better yet, stock up on spices and seasonings to add variety to the boring food. Rice tends to be a staple in many people's diet anyway, so all you need to do is increase the amount you have in your pantry. By the way, can we say pasta? Dried pasta, spaghetti, macaroni, and so forth will keep for a fairly long time if you keep it in an airtight container. Not so much for that jar of ragu, but that takes you back to the canned goods, canned spaghetti sauce, canned tomato sauce, and so forth. As with canned goods, buy a little extra every time you go to the store. It isn't necessary to stock an entire underground bunker in one go. That said, there's one more important thing. Whatever you decide to stock up on, make it something that you and your family's going to eat. The best way to do it is to buy what you eat anyway and just rotate through the supplies before they expire, like the grocery store when they stock their shelves. That way, you don't end up with 2 cases of SpaghettiOs about to expire that the kids really don't like. That said, how much is enough? It depends on your read of the world we're in today. Personally, I don't think the world's going to crash to the point there's not going to be anything available for a long time, a year or more. But I could be wrong. I think we could see extreme shortages lasting a month. Could things happen to stop resupply for 6 months or a year? It's possible. But I think we'll have bigger problems if that happens. I estimate that I could get by on what I have in stores for 6 months. Although half of that would be relying on boring beans and rice and what I could bring in from the garden. The total cost of real long-term foods that I have on hand is probably only a few $100s. But I bought a lot of it 5 or 6 years ago and have replaced it as I go, as in the case of rice. You can build up a deep pantry too. I encourage you to do so before you need to depend on it. If you don't, well, don't come asking me. My contribution is this advice. I won't have any to spare, especially if it looks like things are going to remain in short supply for any extended period. If you think this content was interesting, leave a comment, hit the like button, subscribe, and join me next time as I share my life and thoughts. Some old man signing off.